You're listening to Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk. Each week, your host, Polly Requa, interviews veterinarians and individuals in the pet industry from across the nation answering pet questions. Bark and Wag podcast is produced weekly for your enjoyment, and show notes can be found at barkandwag.com under the podcast tab. That's BARKNWAG.com. Please remember to subscribe to Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk. Thank you for listening to Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address, www.barkandwag.com, to your friends and other pet owners. Have a pressing question for a veterinarian? Ask your question at barkandwag.com under the podcast tab. This has been a KFR production. Join us next time for another edition of Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk.
Thank you for listening to Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk. Bark and Wag is dedicated to protecting our dogs through advocacy, education, and supporting like-minded dog lovers by selling custom pet products. Bark and Wag is excited to announce our new partnership with a Colorado hemp farm to produce a line of CBD products for your pets. Bark and Wag has CBD pet tincture available in 300, 750, 1200, and 2400 milligrams. Bark and Wag CBD is pet safe, no THC, it's made in the USA, and is CO2 extracted. Please check out Bark and Wag's website, barkandwag.com. That is BARK, to see our line of CBD and awesome merchandise. We love pooch ideas for podcasts and merchandise, so anytime send an email to Polly at barkandwag.com with your suggestions.
Welcome to Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk. I'm your host, Polly Requa. Today we're talking to renowned veterinarian specialist, exotic expert, and author. Welcome, Dr. Mader. Thanks for being back on the podcast.
Oh, Polly, it's so great to be invited back. I had a great time last time. Thank you so much. It's an honor.
Well, I wanted to have you back because you had discussed that after you completed your specialty boards, your whole reputation just skyrocketed, and you appeared on Animal Planet, National Geographic, Discovery. Tell the listeners what that was like.
It's a lot of fun. Kind of putting the cart before the horse a little bit here, because a lot of those reality shows didn't show up until the early 2000s. I took my first set of specialty boards in the early 90s, and yes, fortunately my reputation just kind of shot through the roof, which was fantastic, and I started picking up clients. I got a lot of TV stars, movie stars, soap opera stars, sports celebrities, because we had the LA Rams and the LA Raiders at the time, the Los Angeles Dodgers. So we had a lot of celebrities coming in, and a lot of them would have pretty unique pets. And some of them would bring me their dogs and cats, but I'd see a lot of really unusual pets. And I did some work with, I can mention their names, but I can't necessarily mention what I did just out of privacy reasons. I did a lot of work with Kirstie Alley. Remember, she was very popular on Cheers and several other shows. Believe it or not, Michael Jackson has his own private veterinarian, and they had some issues with some of their reptiles, and so he would contact me to help out with some of Michael Jackson's reptiles. Slash from Guns N' Roses used to collect reptiles, and I would go to his facility and help him out with his animals, and it was fun. What's really neat is, you see these people and they're up on a pedestal, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's Kirstie Alley or Michael Jackson. And then you meet them, and they're just animal lovers like you and I. They're just like everybody else, and they're just as concerned and worried and like, oh my gosh, my pet snake, my pet dog, my pet pig is sick. They're no different than anybody else, and it was absolutely wonderful to work with these people. But I do have a real quick funny story to share about Slash, and I did go to his. He lived in Hollywood, and he bought the house next to him so he could keep his reptiles. So he lived in one house, and he bought the house next door, and it was nothing but his pet reptiles. And I got called up to his house one day to look at a sick snake. And when I got in the house, he had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cages. So many so that to get between the cages, you had to kind of walk sideways. And then the cages were stacked on top of each other. So if the animal was in a cage on the top rows, it was easy to see. If it was in a cage on one of the bottom rows, you almost have to get down and lay on the floor to look in the cage. So it just so happened that one of his snakes was in the bottom cage. So I'm laying on the floor looking at the snake, checking it out. And he says, oh, by the way, there's a loose gaboon viper in the room.
Oh, God.
I'm thinking, oh my God, a Gawoon viper has got to be one of the most venomous snakes in the world. And here I am laying on this floor in between all of these snakes thinking, oh my God, this thing is going to sneak up behind me and bite me in the butt. So that was quite an interesting challenge.
Did you find the poisonous snake?
Never found it. In fact, the next time I went, I asked him, I said, hey, did you ever find the viper? He goes, no. He goes, I know he's in here because I've seen his poop on the floor. And I'm going, oh, great.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so that was kind of fun. But like I said, you meet these people and you see them on TV and you think, oh God, they're celebrities, but they're just like you and I. They're animal lovers. And that human-animal bond transcends socioeconomic class, race, religion, sex, anything, nationality. It doesn't matter. People are people when it comes to animals, and they all have that same love for animals like you and I do. And
so Michael Jackson had a zoo, didn't he?
He did. He was an amazing person. He had a phenomenal zoo, and he had like a fairgrounds, and he kept everything. He spent tons and tons of money giving these animals the best care possible. Like I said, he had a private veterinarian that did all of his animals for him, who was just one of the best veterinarians in the world. And he would bring children in from all over, orphanages, hospitals, low-income areas, and he would let these kids play in his park. They could ride the tilt-a-whirl as many times as they want. They could go to the movie and eat all of the popcorn they wanted. They could visit and feed the giraffe. It was a pretty amazing place. He was an incredible individual.
So going back to any of these celebrities, like, for example, Slash, why do you think that he was drawn to exotic animals?
I don't know. He just liked them. I mean, he really had a passion for reptiles, and he had a beautiful, beautiful collection. He had a full-time keeper that took care of all the animals, and they were in immaculate condition. And he got my name because I was writing for a magazine called Reptiles Magazine. He got my name from the magazine, contacted the editor of the magazine. The editor ended up doing a story about him and all of his reptiles, and then the editor introduced Slash to me so that I could go out and start taking care of his animals. And then it was interesting because once I kind of like got my foot in the door with a couple celebrities, then they all talk, and then they all started saying, well, we use, Doug Mader for our monkeys or for our snakes or for our birds or our pigs, or, hey, while you're coming out, will you look at my dog and cat while you're here? So it turned out to be really fun, and I got some great stories from those times in LA.
I bet. What type of care do snakes need?
I think, if you want to have a pet animal, I think the snake is probably one of the best ones, especially if you're a busy person, because a lot of the snakes will only eat once every month or so, So if you travel a lot, you feed your snake, kiss him on the head, go on your trip, come back 3 weeks later, and he's happy to see you. He or she is happy to see you. It's not like a dog or a cat that you have to feed, clean, walk every day. With snakes, are really easy keepers. So long as you have a good cage for them and they're properly warmed and you feed them when they need it, they're super easy to keep. They don't make a lot of noise. They don't smell. I had a pet snake for many, many, many years. In fact, I still have two small ones that live on my bookshelf right next to my computer.
Like, I don't know anything about snakes or reptiles. How often do you have to clean their cage? And
again, that's what makes it so easy, is they only poop when they eat, and you only feed them once every 2 or 3 weeks, depending on the snake, sometimes more than that. That's the only time you have to clean them. So again, they don't stink, they don't smell, they're easy keepers, they're quiet. They're great if you're a busy person and you travel a lot. And you know what else, Polly? They never talk back. So
yeah,
if
exactly.
I had a bad day at work, I can come home and I can take out my little hog-nosed snake and I'll hold him, and I'll talk to him and let him know what I had during the day. And he always sits there and listens. He flicks his tongue in approval. He never criticizes me, never tells me what a terrible veterinarian or person that I am. We get along great.
Well, thank you very much for all these great stories. And do you want to tell the listeners about your book?
Sure, thank you. My book is called The Vet at Noah's Ark, Stories of Survival from an Inner City Animal Hospital. And it's about the year that I lived in LA, and it happened to be surrounded by the unrest of the Rodney King riots. It also happened to be the year that I studied for my first set of specialty boards, which was in 91, 92. So the whole book takes place over 1 year, and it's basically situated in the middle of the inner city. And I had a phenomenal crew working with me, and a lot of them were ex-cons that turned out to be just phenomenal animal lovers. We didn't have parking lots in the inner city, so there was a lot of drama just walking to and from the cars at night. I had employees stabbed. I had Sadly, I don't want to be I don't want to give it away, but during the riots, I had a client killed out in front of my hospital. It was a lot of drama. It's a great book about the human-animal bond and the love that people have for their pets and what they'll do to sacrifice to help their pets. Happens to be written in the first person, which is me, but it's really a story about people and their pets living in the inner city, kind of like the famous James Herriot books, All Creatures Great and Small, but where his books were written in the beautiful rolling green countryside of Yorkshire, England. Mine is smack dab in the middle of the concrete jungle, replete with gangs, graffiti, violence, hookers, and carrying a 9mm to work.
That's amazing. All for the love of animals.
Absolutely. I would do it all over again if I had to. I love it.
And how can listeners get a hold of you?
Oh, that's easy. Thank you. I have a website, www.dougmater.com, just my name.com. You can also look me up on Instagram or my Facebook page, and I post a lot of great pictures of my cases that I work on, alligators, giraffes, manatees, dolphins, you name it, it's all on there. Or if you're interested in getting the book, and I hope you get one, Amazon has it, and all the main booksellers, Barnes & Nobles, Books & Books, Walgreens, not Walgreens, but Walmart, and Target, they all carry it as well.
I'll put all the information in the show notes, and we can't thank you enough for being on the podcast.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure, Polly. I really appreciate the invite.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address, www.barkandwag.com, to your friends and other pet owners. Have a pressing question for a veterinarian? Ask your question at barkandwag.com under the podcast tab. This has been a KFR production. Join us next time for another edition of Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk.